So George, I still show you in the queue sending media. Did you want to talk?
Nope. His mic was still on.
Okay.
I think we're there. It's 1 o'clock.
No, it's not. It's 7 o'clock.
Okay, let's start. Welcome everybody. This is the Registration Protocol Extensions Working Group. I want to thank you all for being here, morning, afternoon, evening, or night. And a special welcome to all the sysadmins in our group, since today is officially International System Administration Appreciation Day. So that being said, next slide, Jim. Jim, next slide. Yeah, thank you. This is the notewell. We expect everybody to have read it. Everything you say here will be recorded. Next. Jim, yes, thank you. So we will have some welcome and introduction, status of existing work in progress, existing work, and any other business. Did you have a next slide for the details of the welcome and introductions, Jim? I think you did. Yes. So for the Jabber Scribe, we don't have a Jabber Scribe yet, but I will be watching the Jabber Scribe from item 2 on the agenda, so don't worry about that. We have a minutes taker, George, who is doing that in the COVID thing in Meet Echo. So if anybody wants to assist, please do. Document management, we will have an oversight later on in the meeting, and of course, all the time we have special attention to our document shepherds. We're very pleased that since we introduced appointing or asking for a document shepherd when documents are adopted in our working group, that process is going very well. We're very content with it. If this is the first time you meet with registration extensions protocols, then please note that being a shepherd is a very rewarding job because you will get to know the IETF process a little bit better from the inside. That's it for the introduction, I think. Jim, next slide. And you are going to do the status of existing work in progress.
Okay, so we're just going to walk through our documents that we have and just in the status that they're in on the page. And if folks want to ask any questions, that's fine. But we have an awful lot of documents that are kind of in progress along the way towards publication. Unfortunately, this meeting, we don't have any documents that have been published since the last meeting. We've actually been pretty good lately in having one the last couple of meetings, but not this time. On the other hand, we have quite a few documents that are getting very close to being published. The login security sanctions is in the RFC editor queue. Actually, I think it's in Auth 48. So it's on the cusp of being on the way out. We have the data escrow documents or an IESG evaluation. We've been going through some comments there, just closing off on some comments from some of the IESG members. But I do think they're in a good place and getting ready to be handed off to the RFC editor soon. We have the functional spec specification, something which was kind of languishing for years while we waited for some ICANN processes to catch up. And now they're in a place where they'll be under review here with our area director. And Barry, I see you out there in the queue, so please go ahead.
So for this document, I'm actually suggesting that we move this, we take this out of the working group and move it to the independent stream. And I owe a reply on this. The issue isn't that it's informational, that it's perfectly fine, of course, for the working group to do informational documents. It's just that this particular document is more documenting an ICANN process. And what would it really mean to say that the IETF has consensus on this document? it's not something that we can really change because it's documenting something from ICANN. I think it's perfectly fine to do this through the independent stream, and that's what the independent stream is for. So the working group should think about that and think about whether they're okay with that path.
So Gustavo.
Just one question for the independent submission stream. It's my understanding that you need to have the one of the area directors to sponsor your draft or something like that. Is that correct?
The independent stream, you contact the RFC editor directly. Adrian Farrell is the independent stream editor, and he will go through a lightweight review process with you and publish the document directly. And it does not go through IETF consensus. It's just published.
Okay, got it. So I don't know, Jim, should we discuss in the mailing list if this is the way to go, or do you want to discuss it here? I mean, I don't know what is the next step.
We can certainly ask the question here if anyone else would like to comment and has anything they want to say, but I suspect we should just make sure there's no objections on the mailing list if anyone wants to make a case in a different direction. Barry's making a suggestion about what to do with it. Unless someone has a strong opinion about something different, then I would guess that that's the direction you'll go in. But Rich, I see you in the queue. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me okay, Joe?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thanks. This is a gentle comment. I certainly agree with and understand where Barry is coming from and understanding his position and point about the where he's saying about a working group document. One of the reasons that ICANN is and the ICANN process is leveraging the work of the IETF in this situation and in similar situations is in order to actually get the input and wisdom, I guess, for lack of a better term, of the technical community on these kinds of things. And so while Barry's points have a ton of merit, one of the concerns with moving it to the independent stream would be, how do these kinds of documents get the kind of broad technical input and review from the community of technical experts that exists in regex in order to drive the kind of technical quality into a functional specification like this, as it got via the thorough working group review here. So that's the one very gentle suggestion that I offer. Barry's points have all tons of merit, obviously, him being the AD and that, but that's the comment that I would make. Thank you.
So Richard, that exactly, I agree with you. And I think it's perfectly fine for and the working group has worked on this document and has finished because it was sent up to me. I think it's perfectly fine for the working group to process one of these documents, a document like this, provide its technical input, have the conversations, but then in the end say, the publication of this document really belongs with the independent stream, not with the IETF stream. Because the working group has given its input, but coming and saying that this document is an IETF consensus document is kind of funny in this case. So yeah, I think this followed a very good process, and I'm glad the working group had the input it had to it.
Okay, that's a great clarification, Barry. Thank you very much. And as Roger said, +1 there. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. I think what that turns into, Gustavo, is we probably should, because not everyone attends this audio meeting, and in principle, it is the mailing list in which we conduct our work. It would be helpful to probably ask the question on the mailing list and just make sure that no one objects and then pull it out. I mean, if you're looking for working group review, I think that would be a good process to follow. Just make sure that no one has any comments to make there. And
as I said, I owe Gustavo a response on the mailing list to his last message, so I'll give that response, and that will clarify it there as well.
okay, thanks. And it looked like somebody popped in and out of the queue there. I think that was Joseph. Did you want to talk, Joseph? Give you another minute to get back in the queue.
It was Barry, and now it's Richard still in the queue. Richard, do you still want to say something? Your mic's still open?
No, I just can't figure out how to turn the bloody thing off.
I can do it for you.
Thank you.
The icon on the right at the top. Yeah.
Yeah, if you hit the mic button again is how you take it back. You use it to get in and you use it to get out. Okay. Well, I'm glad we got that out of the way and settled. So thanks for that. Okay, so going through the rest of the documents here, we just recently put in just a few weeks ago the RDAP partial response and sorting and paging documents. We've been progressing those along for a while, so that's out there. And I believe Barry's getting ready to
call now. So.
Okay, yes, they're on the agenda and going through review. So thank you for that, Barry. We have, so that takes care of existing work of documents that are in the publication cycle at some point along in the process. There's one other document I'm going to mention in this section, which is actually a working group document, and it has been for a while. We remind ourselves at each meeting, this document is paused at the moment. It's will be actively considered when there's an ICANN RDAP working group, which is getting ready now, hopefully soon, to begin doing some work with respect to authenticated queries. And so there will be some interoperability testing and lots of implementation of this and perhaps some other things. But in any case, this work will become active as soon as there's some active development going on. So we're just holding the document at the moment. It's just sitting on pause in our working group waiting for that. And that takes us into a quick milestone review for status of our current work. This represents the list of documents that actually do belong to this working group. You'll notice at the top that we have one document which currently has a past due milestone review. I'm not going to focus too much on these right now. Each of these documents is going to get a little bit of time shortly in the next section. We're going to walk through all of our open documents here. I point out the past due one at the top, and then on March 21st, you'll notice that March 2021, rather not 21st, 21 next year, the Open ID document we were just talking about, we pushed out the milestone to next year in hopes of that work actually beginning this year. We're still hopeful about that, and you know, and that way we'll hopefully try to get this document wrapped up and ready to go. And then we're going to see in the conversation that we are about to have, we have a number of documents that don't have a milestone date yet. So as part of the discussion that we're about to get into, we're going to review all of these documents, these working group documents that are just sitting here, and we'll be asking about milestones that we don't have and document shepherds and such as we need them. So I think with that, we will move into the next area of our agenda, which is calling existing work, which is now going through all of our documents. And Antoine, I think back over to you, right?
Is that true? I can do this, but I was watching the Jabber and the queue anyway. Existing work, reverse search capabilities. Yes, that's a good document, I think, to discuss. I don't know if, let's see, if Mario is here. The reverse search is actually, you know, we know what we need to do with this document. There were some comments then when we discussed this document about from the human rights group, and we wanted to have some input in there, some text in there about that. And we're still waiting for that. So my question to the working group is, what do we do with it? Do we just put it on the mailing list and say, you know, nobody is commenting, but everybody's objecting? What would be the suggestion of the working group? Is there anybody that wants to comment? Because if we don't get any advice or feedback from the working group, we will consider this document as not being wanted. I don't think that's something that some people in this working group might want.
Yeah, if I can just, you know, add to that a little bit while we're waiting for someone to jump up. Part of this discussion that we want to have about our existing documents here is, are we going to proceed with these documents and are we going to work on them? Searching is the, you know, third of there was sort of that set of RDAP documents, sorting and paging and partial response, and searching was there, and it's kind of the last one in the group. But there is just a question to this group at all. Are we going to deal with the searching issue in RDAP? Are we looking to do any work in this space? I mean, it's fair to say that we're not, or we need someone to step up and say they want to move forward with it, and resolve the question of what features and services we need. And now we can stop talking because we have George in the queue. So George, go ahead, please.
You hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. This framework, RDAP, is a joint specification across all kinds of registries, domain registries and number registries. And one of the goals that we have in this space is to consider RDAP as the logical replacement for WHOIS in the context of the ICANN WHOIS problem. It may not be a charter goal, but it's most definitely a goal in our heads. We have WHOIS, it sucks, RDAP is better, we want RDAP to be fully capable because we are considering a future world where we deprecate WHOIS or we call RDAP WHOIS. So, WHOIS in number space has support for reverse search mechanisms. Now, I understand that there are significant privacy risks and concerns, and I understand why the community would say be very careful. But the idea of saying, oh, we don't want to do this, that really doesn't fly with me, because this is a fundamental tool used by law enforcement and related agencies performing searches in our WHOIS. So if we're going to call RDAP a functional replacement for WHOIS, it has to support this kind of technology, or it has to have a body of work that explains why not.
Okay,
Thanks, George.
Ulrich, please go ahead.
.se, and I just wanted to say that the reverse search, I mean, we have had this document coming up in our meetings sometimes, and we always had this problem with the security and the privacy considerations. And I mean, and I think that is the main problem with the document. I think we have actually agreement in the group, or I had the feeling that we had agreement in the group that the functionality is very much needed. But the privacy part can't just say, follow the law. It has to say something more. And I think that is the fundamental problem with the document. As I said, I think the functionality is very much needed, and so I think but if ICANN is going to have a big working group around this, maybe this is something that even should be tested in that working group, and that we should revisit this document after that working group has come to a conclusion how to do that and what the privacy risks are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So before we go to Jim, I want to just respond to one thing that Ulrich said. You know, at least from my point of view, use chair's prerogative here and jump in. You're talking about ICANN having its own working group. I think that ICANN has some policy considerations with respect to searching, but it needs this technical specification in order to properly, you know, propose and manage its policy considerations. And I think that folks are right. Listening to George and listening to Ulrich here, most of the discussion that we've had in our mailing list has been about the privacy and security considerations. And there've been a small group of people who have been really just objecting to this document, suggesting that we're not addressing those concerns. I don't know what exactly the right way is to deal with that. We've asked them for text, and they don't. You know, they provided some rather lengthy and extensive text, which seemed inappropriate also. So we're going to have to find a way to get past that question. Is the technical specification enough? Is it done in its own face? And then we've got to find a way to get past the privacy and security considerations so that we can move on with this document and make it available. And I'll be quiet now. Let's get to some working group members here. I guess Jim Reed is next.
Yes.
Thanks, Jim. I was going to do a rant about who is an RDAP, but I thought better about it. I would suggest what we try to do here is just focus exclusively on the technical concerns. And when it comes to the problems around privacy and security and all the other icky, nasty stuff that surrounds this whole RDAP who is space, I think all we can really say here is that this problem is intractable from a technical point of view. There's no way that the IETF or anybody else can solve that problem. Don't even try. And it's up to individual registries when they implement this protocol to take their own local legal advice about what they have to do about this, because that will be different. I know that, for example, that everyone starts talking about GDPR. GDPR is all over the place. But even within the countries that are bound by GDPR, essentially all the European Union countries, there are differences of emphasis in each country about how GDPR is enforced and enacted in local legislation. So broadly speaking, what is legal in one European country is illegal in another, even though they're both underpinned by the same regulation. So don't even attempt to try and solve this problem, because it's completely and utterly broken and can't be fixed. And the best that can be done is to say to somebody that's going to stand up an RDAP server for whatever purposes is, consult your local lawyers and local law enforcement and government. That's the only thing we can do here.
I sort of agree with you, Jim, if I can jump in. That's actually what should be written in the security and privacy section of this document. The problem is nobody is willing to draft that text. So,
okay, move to Roger.
yes.
Okay, Roger dropped out. Move to Yazdip, and he has dropped out also.
There's Roger again.
Oh, Yazdip is coming back again. Okay.
Or are we all just testing our buttons?
Okay, Roger. Hold on a second. Let's say yes to Roger, and now you should be able to talk, Roger.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Great, thanks. So when you raise your hand, it shows raising your hand, and when you hit send audio, it takes your hand down. So that's what's happening, Jim. Anyway.
Yeah, you need to wait. You just need to wait to be approved, and then it works. There's also the immediate send button is a different thing. There's the two microphones. If you hit the send audio, then it just blasts into the room while you're talking.
Okay, great. Getting back to the question, it seems like this is something then someone from the number side should try to push the pin with then. If the name side does not have an interest in this, then someone on the number side should probably pick up the pin and run. and everybody here obviously can contribute, but it seems like if we're looking for someone to do this, someone from the number side should step up since it's a fundamental issue for them. Thanks.
Thanks, Roger. Let's go to Jazdip. And he keeps coming and going. I think give you another chance there to come back. Just
Yes.
put your hand up. Just put your hand up. Put the hand up on the microphone and then wait. Okay, and now just start talking. All right, we'll try Jody here. Hold on a moment. All right, so Jody, we're going to approve, and now Jody, you should be able to speak.
Just making sure you guys can hear me. Can you?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So my question was that basically this seems to be a problem just with the numbers, as Roger said, since when someone goes into put anything into, I believe it's AppNet or anything else, they're basically giving up their privacy so that their information can be searched on the internet like that. It's not the same way for domain registrars or registries. So there are two fundamentally different implementations as far as privacy is concerned. For the regional NICs, when someone applies for a number or for an IP, they give up their privacy basically, because that's part of signing up, is that your name will be searched on the internet and it will be displayed. But that's not the same for domains or for what ICANN is concerned. So I agree with Roger that that's why it's got to be two different. There has to be something put in there, and then maybe the numbers people should be putting that in there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Let's fill out the queue here. I have a point of view too, but I want to finish rolling out the queue here, and then we got to move on to one of the other documents. I think we're only planning to have about 10 minutes of document. We can come back to this later. Scott, you should be able to speak now.
Thanks, Jim. This is Scott Hollenbeck. So I noticed two things while looking at the draft just now. It does have privacy and security considerations sections. And if we think that the text that's there is inadequate, I mean, we should certainly propose whatever kinds of changes are necessary to address the types of concerns we're talking about right now. Secondly, it does note that there are no IANA considerations. That's probably incorrect. Like any RDAP extension, there should probably be something registered there, that would appear in the RDAP conformance section of a response to note that, hey, I'm doing something beyond the core specs. So I don't know, is Mario on the call? Anyway, I'll
see him.
send that feedback to the list.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, Jazdip, we're going to just approve your microphone, and then you should be able to just talk. Don't do anything.
As soon as you approve, it breaks up.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the microphone button again, and that takes it away. You don't have to press the button to talk. You just have to press to ask permission.
And then we press the button for the microphone.
Yeah. So, my feeling, Scott, did you want to speak?
Nope.
No, okay. My, speaking as chair, I think the problem with this document has been that we never got past the privacy and security considerations discussion here. Thanks, Scott, for noticing the IANA question too. That actually is a technical issue that we do need to deal with in the document. But I have kind of felt that we just never really seemed to quite get consensus on what to put in privacy and security considerations. The proposal that I would have here that we've never really gotten text for, unfortunately, is I don't think we necessarily have to solve the problem of privacy and security. We simply have to call it out and observe the issues and concerns. And I think Jim Reed probably characterized it best when he simply said, one of the problems with privacy and the functionality is what you need to do is different all over the world. So we're not going to have one protocol to solve that. It really is a policy consideration. Our job is to provide the feature for how to do it and how you apply it. We need to call that out as a concern and leave that. But we never seem to get consensus in the working group on that issue. So maybe for right now, the answer is, do we want to move this document along? And if so, we have to find a way on the mailing list to come to closure on the text that needs to go in that section. I think from a technical point of view, we really haven't had any issues with this document, for a long time, except for Scott pointing out the IANA issue that we do need to fix. So for this document, we do need, I meant to check again here real quick because I don't actually remember if this document needs a document shepherd. I believe that it does. Most of our documents here, so we're going to need a document shepherd for this document, as well as we're going to need an updated milestone. And so that's really what we're looking for in all of these documents, is a shepherd and a milestone if we're going to move that work along. It sounds like there's some desire and need to move this along, so we'll have to take that to the mailing list and see if we can't force that to happen. Okay.
My suggestion: move it to the mailing list. Let's revive this document and see what needs to be done about it.
Okay. So let's move on to the next one.
Yes. So the next two documents, that's the 7482 bis and the 7483 bis. Scott, you are present. You made some comments on the mailing list. Do you want to make any more comments about this?
Sure. Thanks, Antoine. Scott Hollenbeck here. I think these two documents are ready for working group last call. When they were individual submissions, we spent quite a bit of time, looking at the various, the errata, the corrections, the clarifications that were necessary. They were all taken care of. We do have document shepherds identified for both. All of the document shepherd review comments have been addressed. The documents that have been out there with a request for feedback, we haven't gotten any now for a little while. So given that, I said, I think these are ready for working group last call.
Okay. Then I suggest that if nobody is commenting on that, request for working group last call on the mailing list, and we will put that out, I think, Jim.
Yeah, both documents have a document shepherd. The query document is with Mario, and the response document is with Jazzip. So both are ready to go as far as that's concerned. Just a quick question to Scott. I don't recall making this distinction in those who commented on the documents. Would you say we've gotten, it's clear from your point of view that both numbers and names community have looked at this document? Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, Scott Hollenbeck again. Yes. If you look at the feedback that's on the mailing list, I know I've gotten quite a bit of feedback from JazzDeep in particular. Now, I mean, JazzDeep, not the whole numbers community, but he's certainly a representative. And Mario Lafredo has also been very prolific in terms of providing feedback. So, and I know this has also been looked at pretty extensively in what we did with the ICANN community, around the operational profile that they did for RDAP. Quite a bit of that found its way into the necessary clarifications and corrections. So yeah, I think we've got it covered from both sides.
Okay, so then the final question is, the milestone date has not been set for this document yet. Do we make them August 2020?
That works for me.
And then we can put them out the door. Okay, then let's move to the next document, the secure out info transfer. James or Martin, do you want to make any comments? Let's get James' mic on. Go ahead, James.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Yeah, so the last update on this draft was done prior to the interim meeting, where we added signaling for the client and the server and login and the greeting services. And we also added a registration in the IANA consideration section. We have identified a, is this the unhandled? I'm sorry, or is this secure auth info?
The first one is security info.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was doing the opposite. We'll just cover the unhandled first. How about that?
Okay, that's also going to talk about that.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah, we did identify a document shepherd with David Smith. And all the review feedback has been addressed. But pretty much the only work remaining, I think, on this and the other draft is to talk about the track of the drafts. I think other than the track, I believe they're both ready for working group last call. So I'd like to have a more detailed discussion around the use of the BCP track for both these documents. But other than that, they would be good to go. So that's the unhandled namespaces draft. On the secure auth info for transfer, again, we added the signaling for the client and the server in the login and greeting services. There were updates made to the draft associated with inclusion of the random salt in the hash auth info. We added clarification to representation of the null value being dependent on the database. And we added in the security consideration section. So with this, Jody Coker is the document shepherd already. And again, the work is done, I believe, on these drafts. And the only thing remaining to discuss is the track. So it would be ready for working group last call.
Okay, so you want to discuss the track once again?
Yeah, for both, unless anybody else has reviewed the drafts and identified anything that's missing or hasn't been addressed, the only thing, we've discussed it multiple times, is the track. Barry had pointed out section 3 of RFC 2026, which in looking at that, I wasn't sure, maybe Barry can speak to this, was whether or not he was suggesting the use of the applicability statement standards track for these drafts. So you have the technical spec, you also have the applicability statement for being standards track, and then we have the BCP. I feel like they are BCP because they're really not defining protocol, they're defining practices to increase the security or the compliance of implementations of the existing RFCs. So maybe Barry can speak to this and whether or not he suggested going standards track and particularly going the applicability statement standards track.
Hi, this is Barry. So, somebody should turn off their microphone to kill the echo. Okay. It was just a suggestion of something you might consider, not saying that I thought you should, that should be what the working group should do. The working group should consider the possibility. An applicability statement, a technical specification specifies protocol. An applicability statement, excuse me, does not necessarily specify protocol. It specifies how to use the protocol in particular situations. So to the way I interpret applicability statement, what you described fits very well with that. But, arguably so does BCP, and it's just a question of whether you think that this is a standard for how to use the protocol, or whether you're just saying that this is the current practice and that might change and there might be a different current practice at a different time. And whether you want to call it a standard or not. So it's up to the judgment of the working group, but I'm happy to go with whichever you think. But I think applicability statement is what you described, what you described sounds like applicability statement to me.
Okay, thank you, Barry. James, go ahead, James.
Yeah, so when I read through 2026 on the applicability statement, it says it's how and under what circumstances one or more technical specs may be applied to support a particular internet capability. Yeah, I think it could fit in that. And although I was looking at the BCP and it's discussing, designed to be a way to standardize practices. So the two drafts are talking about an operational practice and how to implement the RFCs, and then the applicability statement would be talking about how to apply to support an internet capability. So it's not super clear. It falls into any one of these, but I guess I still feel that the BCP is the right track for these, and I'd like to hear from others on the working group.
And while others are thinking about that, James, your mic is echoing it quite a lot, so I'll turn you off so that I can. When I look in the data tracker, I do see that the unhandled namespaces has no document shepherds assigned yet. Did you discuss that with us on the mailing list? I forgot. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I did. I sent a message saying that I identified David Smith from VeriSign to be the document shepherd.
But we never got confirmation. We'll handle that. Any other members, working group members that want to have a discussion about the BCP or standards track? Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so if there is no strong feelings either way from other members of the working group, I would prefer for it to stick as BCPs and then to request working group last call.
Okay, very well.
We'll include the question of the status, as part of the last call, just a reminder to folks of the status of the document, and we'll see what comes of that also. But, thanks, Jim, for that. And I don't even know that I have a strong opinion, quite honestly. So probably if you're happy and no one objects, then that's the direction we'll go in.
Yeah. Do we have
okay.
any slides, Jim?
Actually, no. That brings us to the end of our existing work, and I think that the only thing we didn't do was a new milestone for reverse search, but there's some work to be done there, so we can take that to the wailing list. But I think we're all pretty well set on everything else, so we'll just clean up our administrative tasks here, and we'll be ready to go. We only have one other significant work item on our list, and that's the next slide here is the one other working group document that we have, and we have a presentation for that document. So if you're ready, Antoine, we can move to that.
So I hadn't put it up. Yes, I think. Let me see. I have to go through the list. I think we have a presenter for this one, don't we? Are you going to?
Yeah, no, Joseph is here. Joseph is going to do it. He's there.
Okay, so Joseph, if you want to present on this, go ahead. Jim, do you put up the presentation? Thank you. Joseph, if you can jump into the queue, I will turn your mic on. Okay, Joseph, go ahead. If you want the video, you can turn that on too.
Hello?
Hello, Joseph. We hear you.
Hi, Anton. Thanks. I was like, I was concerned about the microphone. Thanks, everyone. So do I control the slides, or I have to ask you to turn the page? I guess I don't have access to turn the slides, so I'll ask for your help. Thanks, everyone. Morning, afternoon, evening.
Joseph, your microphone is clicking. It's falling away, so we cannot hear you quite well. We hear that you're talking, but It falls away sometimes.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Only parts of it.
Yeah.
You want to try
How about
reconnecting, Joseph?
now? Okay, I'll try.
This is actually the last item on our agenda here, so we have a few minutes. The only thing left on our agenda is any other business.
We can do that now.
I suppose I should probably, maybe I'll take a moment to say and just remind people, I've said this before, but I'll say it again, you know, since, you know, I am co-chair here with Antoine, but Joseph and I are doing this document together. I'm going to recuse from any chair responsibilities with respect to handling of this document, so that it will just be on Antoine, so that we don't have any issues there. That's my intent. If anybody has any questions or concerns about that, you can certainly take that up with Antoine directly. Anyway, I'll be quiet now. Looks like Joseph is back, so we'll give this another chance here.
Okay, Joseph, I put your mic on. Say something.
This time? Or it's still choppy?
Well, yeah, I think it's better.
Good enough to go ahead?
Yes, just speak a sentence, because the problem was that the sound dropped in the middle of your sentence.
Oh. So let me see if I raise my voice. Hopefully maybe it will be, and get the microphone really close to my mouth. I hope it will be better for everyone. If not, let me know. Maybe I have to ask Jim to present if necessary.
Jim, could you put up the
You
presentation?
can also, yeah, you can also turn off the video, Joseph. You know, if you mouse over on the videos on your screen, you can hit the pause button that appears, and that might help your bandwidth on your end.
Jim, you put on the note well message. You
Yes.
switched over from presentation.
No.
Yeah, okay, there it is. So go ahead, Joseph.
Okay. Morning, afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is about the simple registration reporting draft. The note well, assuming it's shown up on the screens. Next slide, the page 3 of the slides, the draft status. Just brief history. Was adopted by the working group in May 2020. The initial versions was published on June 1st. The most recent versions, version 01 was published on July 13th. The update on that is we add more reference to about the report specification, particularly the CSV, IDNA 2008, and currently work in progress is expanding the test on setting up the IANA registry for the fields and reports. And so far right now we have defined 34 fields and 7 reports. Next slide, report specifications. As mentioned, we have reference RFC 4180 for the CSV specifications. And the first line of the report is always the column headings, which is the field values, the field names that we intend to be registered with the IANA. So far, we have some open questions that needs to get more broadly discussed. One of the question is, can the field be allowed being optional? Means that if this registry operator allows to not reporting anything about a particular column, and if we do not reporting anything, what would the value of that not reported columns be? Would it be n/a blank 0 or anything? Can the additional column headings can it be ignored? And also unrecognized columns. So the difference between the additional columns and then unrecognized columns is the one that is not registered in the IANA registry. Next slide. In the draft 01, the most recent one, I actually put on one extra column to just to help visualize on that. So that is not the it's not standard adopt yet, but I'm just adding the extra column here to help further the discussions. That's only available in section 3.1 of the transaction report. And on the next slide, I have asked the group, so I also asked it. Yes?
So you're
Can you hear me?
you're very choppy. There's a lot of comments. There's quite a few comments in the chat room here about this. You really do seem to be going in and out. Are you still on the report specification slide?
No, I passed that one.
Yeah, see, we're not,
Oh.
I'm not even hearing you say next slide.
Oh.
I think maybe we should trade off here, and because it's just too choppy coming from you. You're dropping too much.
Okay.
Okay. So report specifications. Let me just touch quickly. Those open questions at the bottom are just work in progress, as Joseph was saying, and they're questions to the group here. So we'll have more discussion about that on the slides. We were having a discussion and a question about whether individual fields were mandatory or optional in terms of when they would appear in a particular standard report. And so this is really a question for folks to consider, in the standard reports. What happens, does there always have to be a value there? Are all fields always required when they're defined for the report? And so this is just one example in a transaction report. We kind of make a suggestion here about whether the value should be present or not. I think there's just a larger question in general about the mandatory versus optional on fields in reports, in columns in reports. I think that we just have to make a choice about how we want to process them. There's certainly an argument in favor of both. Maybe the field is present, maybe it's not. If it is, there should be a value, and if it's not present, that's okay too. You'll figure that out in looking at row 1 in the file, because you'll know which columns are present and where they are. So we just want to call that out as a decision, that a choice that we need to make about how folks want to process it. There are just the question of whether or not the reports that are currently defined, do we have all the column headings that we want to have in those reports? So we need some consideration. We need broader review by more registry operators. We'd like people to look at that. Also more registrars. Creating a standard set of reports is sort of an interesting proposal. There's plenty of room for, ad hoc reports, and plenty of room for, less universally available reports. But do we have the right set of minimum reports, and of course the columns that need to be in them? And we really would like some consideration about that. We captured what we know, but broader review is sure to identify some things that are missing. Are there any other reports that we haven't captured? Recall that this document was originally drawn from the best practices website. There were 9 report specifications that were detailed there. We've captured all of that here, but certainly there's an opportunity for us to think about whether or not there are other reports we want to define as part of creating this mechanism for managing the presence of reports. And finally, even if we don't define reports in this document as a minimum standard set of reports, you know, are there other reports that we should be thinking about? Is this framework going to cover what we know about? You know, there are a variety of reasons why different registries might produce some specialized reports for their registry. Registrars might have special requests that registries produce for them. You know, so maybe they're not part of a standard definition, but since this document, its real goal is about defining a framework for managing standard reports and standard columns, we really want people to be thinking about what other reports do you know about that we won't put in here, but we want to make sure that technically they can be covered by this framework for defining them. So that's an open question. The registry of column headings, this is stuff that's been there before. There really isn't anything new here. You know, anybody can create a value that they want to be able to use in a standard report, and it's just an IANA registry, and it's a first come, first serve registry. So it operates just like the EPP extensions registry that exists, and that seems like a pretty fair way to do it. You know, the only requirement would be not to invent a column that already exists, and, you know, for the IANA registry itself to be self-consistent, obviously. This is just an example of the column heading registry. So these slides, you've seen these before. We've been just carrying these forward. This is the complete collection of data elements in the reports that are currently defined. So, you know, this is just what it looks like, and they'll be defined as part of this document. So the registrant is the ISG in this case, since it's coming out of an RFC. And then there's the registry of reports. You've seen these slides before too. This, you know, this is the framework in order to define a report. It's a first come, first served registry, just like the column headings. And our goal here in this document is to define, you know, kind of a minimum set of universally acceptable reports. I don't really want to, I think it's more of a policy question as to which reports are mandatory or not, but we do want to try to collect a definition of the most common reports that are probably available from most registries for most registrars. And that's what we're trying to put together here. I think the key thing about the registry of reports right now, and this is where we got into, one of the open questions is about whether column headings are optional or mandatory. If you look at the third sub-bullet there under the report registry bullet, it says ordered list of column headings in the report. This is what it looks like, the report registry. And so an important question here is whether or not fields are mandatory or optional and what that really means. And you'll note that you define the report name, and then you simply list the fields that are in the report, and it's intended to be an ordered list. So that's the way row 1 in a given report would always appear in that order. But there's an important question here about optional versus mandatory that we'd like to get some feedback on and just confirm, you know, how people want that to work. Could certainly go either way. A lot depends on how we want things to work. And so that just leaves us with some other questions. These questions were originally in the first version of the document that was distributed and created. We've pulled these topics out of the document based on feedback we've gotten already and having given, you know, had some discussions a couple of times here. But our question now to the working group is what to do with these things. Do we just drop them? Are they suitable for some other specification in, you know, some other work? So those really are the two choices. I'm assuming here that they're not going to be left in this document since we pulled them out. One of the things that we had put in the original document was, okay, if I'm going to create a standard report and it's going to be in a file, should we say something about what that file name looks like or not? And, you know, there's certainly discussion on both sides as to whether we should or not. This is what we had proposed in the original document. But again, the real question to this working group is, are we going to follow through on this work item in some other way since it's not going to be in this document? Or do we think that we should not do any work in this area? So that's a question that we want to put to this group. And the second thing is, again, also with respect to the operation, when the reports are published, do we want to say anything about what that mechanism looks like? in the last discussion, we clearly had said that we didn't want to say it in this document. This should just be a framework for defining the reports. But do we want to have any discussion or any work item, maybe in a separate document or not, as to what it looks like when these documents are published, what the mechanism looks like, or mechanisms that can be used? You know, there's the two obvious choices are SFTP related or HTTPS related mechanisms, and then talk about what the directory looks like. So that's an open question. And then inside of the fields, I think this is probably well defined as part of what CSV defines, but it's worth calling out that this is always an interesting question. And you know, what do we want to say about this in particular? This detail about the separator character between columns. Do we want to specify what that is precisely, and then you have to deal with the escape mechanism, you know, or do we just want to leave that to you sort it out when you load up the CSV file? Generally, you can sort of figure out what's going on there, but you know, how specific do we want to be about that in terms of what it says there and what it looks like? Our feeling is you can't use a comma as a separator between fields, because commas are used inside field values. So, you know, what do we want to specify for what goes between them? Different people do different things, and how to manage that. And we should probably speak to that issue in the document. And I think that's it, right? Yeah, that's the last slide. So that's it. So open discussion, you know, we can, I guess, back to you, Antoine, for how much time you want to spend on this versus taking comments to the mailing list. But we are looking to move this along. We don't have a document shepherd for this, and we haven't set a milestone for this yet. So those are open questions. If anybody wants to speak to what their thoughts are on that here, those would be useful. So our open questions and any comments about document shepherd and milestone. So thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And I see that James is in the queue. Go ahead, James.
Thank you. Yeah, in reviewing the draft and looking at what you're presenting here, I believe the draft should be focused on mechanism, meaning that the definition of concrete reports, I think, is out of scope. I think it's best that it focus on the format of these reports, and things like file names and transport of the reports, I think, is also not well suited for this either. I mean, putting metadata in the file name is not a scalable thing, and we could be using a REST interface as well. So I would just leave it to format if all possible, and leave it on the mechanism, and leave the concrete reports out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Anybody else with comments? Okay, now then it's up to me to ask the authors, of course, of when they want to have their milestone set. So Joseph and Jim, do you have any suggestion on the milestone?
I'm thinking that given the, as feedback has been dropping off, that, you know, it ought to be reasonable for us to finish on this document sometime this year. I'd like to think that with a couple more iterations on some of these finer details here, we ought to be all set to go. So unless there's a strong objection or some other significant comment about this framework, I'd even go so far as to say, you know, December this year, late this year.
Okay. We will ask this question again on the mailing list as well, of course. And also, are there any volunteers to be a document shepherd for this? That's something that I asked now, but we can certainly ask it again on the mailing list.
We'll take as an action to do some direct outreach to see if we can get someone who will volunteer.
Yes, and like I said, you know, at the beginning of the meeting, being a document shepherd is a great opportunity to get some insights on the IETF process, and it's fun work to do. Okay, no more questions on the document reporting document. Then we will move back to the agenda. And after this, there's only one thing left, which is any other business. Does anybody have anything to comment, ask, or discuss about any other business? Still have some time left.
I'll just offer for a moment while we wait to see. I guess no one's going to say anything. Maybe I'll just say we've actually had a pretty good cadence going in this working group. We kind of had our ups and downs, and we've kind of hit a bit of a good cadence going here with a few documents coming out the door, pushing some things along. We've got some new stuff here, which is going to move along quickly too. You know, once we get past this searching and the registration reporting, I don't see anything. The only other thing left on the agenda is the open ID stuff. You know, we might be again hitting a lull here, or maybe we're coming to the end of our life if we're getting into a good place. So just something to think about in general for this working group. Since we generally deal with extensions, it's not clear to me if we would, you know, maybe we need to be available here or not. But I mean, if there's nothing obvious in front of us, maybe we're coming to the end of our life too. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, only coming from George, indeed. Okay, we have Jim. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Antoine. Just in response to Jim, even if the working group has no immediate stuff on its plate for work, I think it might be premature to talk about winding the working group up, because who knows what stuff might every Mercer can at some point in the future. So I would maybe suggest, I don't know if this practical this is from an IETF point of view, is maybe the working group becomes dormant, yes, and then springs back up to life as and when ICANN throws something over the wall.
Well, I like your enthusiasm, Jim, but I do want to observe that we need to be careful not to set ourselves up as a group that just takes on ICANN's work. That's a phrase that tends to incite various feelings in our working group with some participants. We do technical work here, and ICANN does its policy work, and we try not to get in the way of each other. But I take your point nonetheless. You know, I guess my statement was a little bit provocative in hopes of seeing what kinds of views we might get from folks in the group here. As a working group that is looking at and watching for extensions in both RDAP and EPP, dormancy might be a better model than winding down the working group. But we'll just have to see as we move along here. Who knows? Work may come back. It might be a little bit premature, but we'll ask that question and discuss it with our AD as time goes on here. And of course, we're always interested in what working group members think and how people would like to approach this problem space in general and our preparation for dealing with issues. So thanks. Sorry, didn't mean to get too long-winded.
Okay, so
and Jim, you're back.
Jim was just ahead of Jody. So go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, Jim, but I do think we might need to think about this dormant working group thing, because if there isn't an IETF vehicle for things of a technical nature that might emerge from ICANN, maybe that stuff would go somewhere else and not get the benefit of IETF scrutiny. So swings and roundabouts.
Okay, yes. Jim. The next one is Jody. Jody, go ahead.
I'm making sure you guys can hear me. This is Jody Colker. I was just wondering, we have a registry maintenance draft out there. It's been out there for a while. We have a milestone of July. Excuse me. We haven't had much feedback yet. We got some great feedback from Patrick, and we responded to his questions and have not heard back from him yet. But how does this document move into last call then? What is required? I guess I'm a little confused. Thanks.
Well, the first thing that's required is for your chairs to not miss putting it on the list of existing work. I guess that's my fault.
Yes,
Since I was putting the slides together. Wow. Thanks, Jody. Goodness. Well, you're right, Jody. That's a document which it seems fairly stable too, and is probably ready to move along, like the rest of our documents here. So the only thing that's required really for last call is that someone volunteered to do that. Now that document actually does have a document shepherd. I had actually volunteered to be document shepherd on that document. So wow, I get 2 hits for not including it in the list. But yeah, unless anyone has any discussion about that document in particular, I agree with you, Jody. It's probably ready to move along. So we simply take to the mailing list, you know, a request to go to working group last call, and then move that document along. Any comments from anyone else about that particular document? Jody, you want to add to that, or and you don't have to. I think you probably said the most important thing there.
So, Jody, go ahead. It was on the agenda, the document, but it wasn't on the slides Jim made.
That's all right. My internet reconnected here, so I think I missed a little bit of that. But as long as we can send it out to the list, say it's in working group last call or etc., I think we can do that. Thank you. And would we send that out then, or do the chairs need to send that out?
Well, you request for a working group last call, and we will put out the official working group last call.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, and it is actually on the milestone list. And I'm not quite sure how I did that, but you know, given that it is on the milestone list and it's actually listed for October, you know, that's where it was set up. But unfortunately, I managed not to carry that forward into the existing work discussion. So my fault, and thanks, Jody, for noticing that.
So I think that's it. There are no more calls from the Jabber room. No. Then I think, do you have closing remarks, Jim, or shall I just close the meeting and say thank you, everybody, and hope we will soon be able to have a face-to-face meeting again. But seeing the circumstances, I'm still doubting whether or not that will be this year. And we will see each other online again, and let's discuss on the mailing list.
Yeah, as far as I know, officially, the IETF will declare by the end of August whether or not the fall meeting will be face-to-face or not. So I guess we'll just see how that goes. Either way, we'll see you at the next meeting.
Yep. And on the mailing list, of course. We'd like to hear from you. Barry jumped in the queue and he left again. Okay, I think you made his remark for him. Thank you all.
Okay.
And I'm going to see if there are any minutes.
Yep. So we're adjourned. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.